Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. And today, I'm excited to start a whole new series. You're going to get a lot out of this series. This particular series is designed around a book that was written in 1906 called A Series of Lessons in Raja Yoga by Yogi Ramacharaka. Now, these lessons are unique and profound. Yogi Ramacharaka is the pseudonym for William Walker Atkinson. If you have listened to previous episodes of The Reality Revolution, I have an episode where I do a book about crystal gazing, which is written by William Walker Atkinson. William Walker Atkinson was this New Age, New Thought author that wrote some incredible books, several, 30 or 40, I believe, under different pseudonyms. We're still finding new ones. And if you think back to 1906, yoga was not a very popular thing in the West. And he wrote under the pseudonym Yogi Ramacharaka and brought a lot of yoga teachings to the West with several books, in particular 14 Lessons in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism, another book he wrote called Advanced Course in Yogi Philosophy, a book on Hatha Yoga, a book on the science of breath. And this particular book is a series of lessons in Raja Yoga, and essentially it's 12 different lessons that are each designed step by step to expand your consciousness, to give you a greater understanding of yourself, and to lead you on a course of enlightenment. And the reason that I found this very profound is that this is the science of the mind integrated with yoga. And so a lot of these lessons, they're simplistic. Some of them are very powerful, but the lesson, one after another, build upon each other. And so in accessing this material, I found that instead of reading the full book, the best way would be to go through each lesson. And at the end of each lesson in the book are these exercises and meditations accompanied by affirmations. So wouldn't that be perfect if I had designed this course? And that's essentially what this is. And this is the first lesson in this course designed around this book. And at the end of each of these lessons will be a meditation or exercise. And you will follow these exercises, and we'll use the music and everything. So it's going to really expand what was the beginning structure and skeleton of this book. And the lessons are profound, and as doing these exercises and integrating them into my daily habits, it's taught me quite a bit, and it's helped expand my understanding just as powerfully as subjects like reality transurfing and Neville Goddard and neurolinguistic programming. It's the way that the course is designed step by step, and each lesson builds upon itself. And so I will be doing 12 episodes. I can't guarantee exactly when each one's going to come out. I'll do them as best I can. And please know that there may be a point in the future when I will pull these from YouTube and they will be available separately. But I'm making them available now. And if you follow me on this course, I may also add some additional live coaching along with each of these lessons. And what I'm doing when I'm going through these lessons, I'm learning with you. And I'm going on this journey with you. I'm doing these exercises with you. And I'd love to share your comments and ideas on how much you learn from it and what you take from it. So the first question, before we go into the book, that I want to understand is, what is Raja Yoga? And I'm probably not even pronouncing that correctly. Is it Raja Yoga? And in looking it up, in Sanskrit texts, Raja Yoga was both the goal of yoga and a method of attaining it. The term also became a modern name for the practice of yoga when in the 19th century, Swami Vivekananda equated Raja Yoga with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, at some point in the future, I would very much want to read some of Swami Vivekananda's books If you read Autobiography of a Yogi, he refers to Swami Vivekananda, and he has several books that are fantastic. And I think what happened is William Walker Atkinson got access to Swami Vivekananda's books because some of them have a similar title, and he kind of translated it to a more Western perspective. So we will begin with William Walker Atkinson's, and if it works and if it's profound, we'll go back and we'll try to unlock some of those. And as it says, Raja Yoga has been called Ashtanga Yoga, Royal Union. This is not a yoga where we're talking about doing specific kind of exercises. This is a mental form of yoga designed around meditation to help us understand meditation. So Raja means chief, best of its kind, or king, and Raja Yoga thus refers to the chief best of yoga. The history or use of the term Raja Yoga is found in other contexts quite different than its modern usage. In ancient and medieval Sanskrit texts, it meant the highest state of yoga practice. Hatha Yoga Pradipika, for example, refers to Hatha Yoga as one of the ways to achieve Raja Yoga. The first known use of the phrase Raja Yoga occurs in the 16th century commentary on a specific step in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The Hindu scholar Dattatreya, in his medieval-era tantric work Yoga Sastra, explains in 334 shlokas principles of 4 yogas: Mantra Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Laya Yoga, and Raja Yoga. Alan Daniolo states that Raja Yoga was in the historic literature of Hinduism one of the 5 known methods of yoga, with the 4 other being Hatha, Mantra, Laya, and Shiva. The term became a modern retronym in the 19th century. Swami Vivekananda equated Raja Yoga with the Yogi Sutras of Patanjali. So there's a whole history that you can go into, but that's a beginning basis. And William Walker Atkins will explain this. But what we're focused on is the mental plane. And I want to be able to bring this technology that we have with podcasts and YouTube so that we can expand these teachings and we can do these exercises right inside of each of these lessons. You are an initiate, I am too, and we're all students in this process. And so the first lesson out of 12 lessons, and just to give you an index of the lessons, lesson 1 is the I. Lesson 2 will be the ego's mental tools. Lesson 3 is the expansion of the self. Lesson 4 is mental control. Lesson 5 is the cultivation of attention. Lesson 6 is cultivation of perception. Lesson 7 is the unfoldment of consciousness. Lesson 8 is the Highlands and Lowlands of mind. Lesson 9 is the mental planes. Lesson 10 is subconsciousing. Lesson 11 is subconscious character building. And Lesson 12 is subconscious influences. This goes right to the core of what we talk about when we discuss reality creation. And so, these 12 lessons are really lessons in using our minds to create our reality and the beginning steps in that process as we go on this journey. So the first lesson is called the I. In India, the candidates for initiation into the science of Raja Yoga, when they apply to the yogi masters for instruction, are given a series of lessons designed to enlighten them regarding the nature of the real self and to instruct them in the secret knowledge whereby they may develop the consciousness and realization of the real I within them. They are shown how they may cast aside the erroneous or imperfect knowledge regarding their real identity. If you go back to episodes on my podcast, I talk about Neville Goddard, and he is always talking about coming to this realization of the I within us. Well, it's very possible that Neville Goddard was basing his lessons on deep knowledge that came all the way back from these older sciences of yoga. Until the candidate masters this instruction, or at least until the truth becomes fixed in his consciousness, it says, further instruction is denied him, for it is held that until he has awakened to a conscious realization of his actual identity, he is not able to understand the source of his power, and moreover is not able to feel within him the power of the will, which power underlies the entire teaching of Raja Yoga. The Yogi Masters are not satisfied if the candidate forms merely a clear intellectual conception of this actual identity, but they insist that he must feel the truth of the same, must become aware of the real self, must enter into a consciousness in which the realization becomes a part of his everyday self, in which the realizing consciousness becomes the prevailing idea in his mind, around which his entire thoughts and actions revolve. To some candidates, this realization comes like a lightning flash the moment the attention is directed toward it, while in other cases the candidates find it necessary to follow a rigorous course of training before they acquire the realization in consciousness. The Yogi Masters teach that there are 2 degrees of this awakening consciousness of the real self. The first, which they call the consciousness of the I, is the full consciousness of real existence that comes to the candidate, and which causes him to know that he is a real identity, having a life not depending upon the body, life that will go on in spite of the destruction of the body, real life, in fact. The second degree, which they call the consciousness of the I am, is the consciousness of one's identity with the universal life and his relationship to and in touchness with all life, expressed and unexpressed. These 2 degrees of consciousness come in time to all who seek the path. To some, it comes suddenly. To others, it dawns gradually. To many, it comes assisted by the exercises and practical work of Raja Yoga. The first lesson of the Yogi Masters to the candidates, and notice they say candidates because this first lesson, according to William Walker Atkinson, you are not allowed to gain these future teachings and knowledge until you go beyond being just a candidate. And at this point, you are just a candidate. I am just a candidate. The first lesson of the Yogi Masters to the candidates, leading up to the first degree above mentioned, is as follows: that the supreme intelligence of the universe, the Absolute, has manifested the being we call man. Sound familiar? The highest manifestation on this planet. The Absolute has manifested an infinite of forms of life in the universe, including distant worlds, suns, planets, many of these forms being unknown to us on this planet and being impossible of conception by the mind of the ordinary man. Sounds a lot like the law of one to me. In this particular sentence, they're saying the Absolute has manifested an infinitude of forms, life in the universe, including distant worlds, suns, planets, many of these forms being unknown to us on this planet and being impossible of conception in the mind of the ordinary man. But these lessons have nothing to do with that part of the philosophy which deals with these myriad forms of life. For our time will be taken up with the unfoldment in the mind of man of his true nature and power. Before man attempts to solve the secrets of the universe without. He should master the universe within, the kingdom of the self. When he has accomplished this, then he may and should go forth to gain the outer knowledge as a master demanding its secrets, rather than as a slave begging for the crumbs from the table of knowledge. The first knowledge for the candidate is the knowledge of the self. Man, the highest manifestation of the Absolute as far as this planet is concerned, is a wonderfully organized being, although the average man understands but little of his real nature. He comprises within his physical, mental, and spiritual makeup both the highest and the lowest, as we have shown in our previous lessons, the 14 lessons and the advanced course, which I will go over someday as well. In his bones, he manifests almost in the form of mineral life. In fact, in his bones, body, and blood, mineral substances actually exist. The physical life of the body resembles the life of the plant. Many of the physical desires and emotions are akin to those of the lower animals. And in the undeveloped man, these desires and emotions predominate and overpower the higher nature, which latter is scarcely in the evidence. Then man has a set of mental characteristics that are his own, and which are not possessed by the lower animals. And in addition to the mental faculties common to all men, or rather that are in evidence in a greater or lesser degree among all men, there are still higher faculties latent within man, which when manifested and expressed render man more than ordinary man. The unfoldment of these latent faculties is possible to all who have reached the proper stage of development, and the desire and hunger of the student for his instruction is caused by the pressure of these unfolding latent faculties, crying to be born into consciousness. Then there is that wonderful thing, the will, which is but faintly understood by those ignorant of the yogi philosophy, the power of the ego, its birthright from the Absolute. But while these mental and physical things belong to man, they are not the man himself. Before the man is able to master, control, and direct the things belonging to him, his tools and instruments, he must awaken to a realization of himself. He must be able to distinguish between the I and the not I. And this is the first task before the candidate. That which is the real self of man is the divine spark sent forth from the sacred flame. This is discussed in reality transurfing. The idea that there's a spark inside of us. I've discussed it before. Maybe the spark comes in through our third eye, but I believe it rests in our heart. And so when we say we need to align our heart and mind, it starts in our heart. Maybe it's branched through our body, but there's a spark inside of us that is God. And imagine right now carrying or walking around inside of your meat sack is a spark of God, and that you are God. But the part of you that is God, you have to really question, is it the meat? If you cut off your hand, you're still you, right? You weren't your hand. So the question is, who are you really? It is the child of the divine parent. It is immortal, eternal, indestructible, invincible. It possesses within itself power, wisdom, and reality. But like the infant that contains within itself the sometime man, the mind of man is unaware of its latent and potential qualities and does not know itself. As it awakens and unfolds into the knowledge of its real nature, it manifests its qualities and realizes what the Absolute has given it. When the real self begins to awaken, it sets aside from itself those things that are but appendages to it, but which it, in its half-waking state, had regarded as itself. Setting aside first this and then that, it finally discards all of the not I, leaving the real self free and delivered from its bondage to its appendages. Then it returns to the discarded appendages and makes use of them. In considering the question, what is the real self? Let us first stop to examine what man usually means when he says, I. The lower animals do not possess the I sense. They are conscious of the outer world, of their own desires and animal cravings and feelings, but their consciousness has not reached the self-conscious stage. They are not able to think of themselves as separate entities and to reflect upon their thoughts. They are not possessed of a consciousness of the divine spark, the ego, the real self. The divine spark is hidden in the lower forms of life, even in the lower forms of human life, by many sheaths that shut out its light. But nevertheless, it is there, always. It sleeps within the mind of the savage. Then as he unfolds, it begins to throw out its light. In you, the candidate, it is fighting hard to have its beams pierce through the material coverings. When the real self begins to arouse itself from its sleep, its dreams vanish from it, and it begins to see the world as it is, and to recognize itself in reality and not as the distorted thing of its dreams. The savage and barbarian are scarcely conscious of the I. They are but a little above the animal in point of consciousness, and their I is almost entirely a matter of the consciousness of the wants of the body, the satisfaction of the appetites, the gratification of the passions, the securing of personal comfort, the expression of lust and savage power. In the savage, the lower part of the instinctive mind is the seat of the I. If the savage could analyze his thoughts, he would say that the I was the physical body, the said body having certain feelings, wants, and desires. The I of such a man is a physical I, the body representing its form and substance. Not only is this true of the savage, but even among so-called civilized men of today, we find many in this stage. They have developed powers of thinking and reasoning, but they do not live in their minds, as do some of their brothers. They use their thinking powers for the gratification of their bodily desires and cravings, and really live on the plane of the instinctive mind. Such a person may speak of my mind or my soul, not from a high position where he looks upon these things from the standpoint of a master who realizes his real self, but from below, from the point of view of the man who lives on the plane of the instinctive mind, and who sees above himself the higher attributes. To such people, the body is the I. Their I is bound up with the senses, and that which comes to them through the senses. Of course, as man advances in culture and civilization, his senses become educated and are satisfied only with more refined things, while the less cultivated man is perfectly satisfied with more material and gross sense gratifications. Much that we call cultivation and culture is not, but a cultivation of a more refined form of sense gratification instead of a real advance in consciousness and unfoldment. It is true that the advanced student and master is possessed of highly developed senses, often far surpassing those of the ordinary man. But in such cases, the senses have been cultivated under the mastery of the will and are made servants of the ego. Instead of things hindering the progress of the soul, they are made servants instead of masters. As man advances in the scale, he begins to have a somewhat higher conception of the I. He begins to use his mind and reason, and he passes on to the mental plane. His mind begins to manifest upon the plane of intellect. He finds that there is something within him that is higher than the body. He finds that his mind seems more real to him than does the physical part of him. And in times of deep thought and study, he is able to almost forget the existence of the body. In this second stage, man soon becomes perplexed. He finds problems that demand an answer. But as soon as he thinks he has answered them, the problems present themselves in a new phase, and he is called upon to explain his explanation. The mind, even though not controlled and directed by the will, has a wonderful range. But nevertheless, man finds himself traveling around and around in a circle, and realizes that he is confronted continually by the unknown. This disturbs him, and the higher the stage of book learning he attains, the more disturbed does he become. The man of but little knowledge does not see the existence of many problems that force themselves before the attention of the man of more knowledge, and demand an explanation from him. The tortures of the man who has attained the mental growth that enables him to see the new problems and the impossibility of their answer cannot be imagined by one who has not advanced to that stage. The man in this stage of consciousness thinks of his I as a mental thing, having a lower companion, the body. He feels that he has advanced, but yet his I does not give him the answer to the riddles and questions that perplex him. And he becomes most unhappy. Such men often develop into pessimists and consider the whole life as utterly evil and disappointing, a curse rather than a blessing. Pessimism belongs to this plane, for neither the physical plane man or the spiritual plane man have this curse of pessimism. The former man has no such disquieting thoughts, for he is almost entirely absorbed in gratifying his animal nature, while the latter man recognizes his mind as an instrument of himself rather than himself, and knows it to be imperfect in its present stage of growth. He knows that he has in himself the key to all knowledge locked up in the ego, and which the trained mind, cultivated, developed, and guided by the awakened will, may grasp as it unfolds. Knowing this, the advanced man no longer despairs, and recognizing his real nature and his possibilities as he awakens into a consciousness of his powers and capabilities. He laughs at the old despondent pessimistic ideas and discards them like worn-out garment. Man on the mental plane of consciousness is like a huge elephant who knows not his own strength. He could break down barriers and assert himself over nearly any condition or environment. But in his ignorance of his real condition and power, he may be mastered by a puny driver or frightened by the rustling of a piece of paper. When the candidate becomes an initiate, when he passes from the purely mental plane into the spiritual plane, he or she realizes that the I, the real self, is something higher than either body or mind, and that both of the latter may be used as tools and instruments by the ego or I. This knowledge is not reached by purely intellectual reasoning, although such efforts of the mind are often necessary to help in the unfoldment, and the masters so use it. The real knowledge, however, comes as a special form of consciousness. The candidate becomes aware of the real I. And this consciousness being attained, he passes to the rank of the initiates. When the initiate passes the second degree of consciousness and begins to grow into a realization of his work, into a realization of his relationship to the whole, when he begins to manifest the expansion of self, then he's on the road to mastership. In the present lesson, we shall endeavor to point out to the candidate the methods of developing or increasing the realization of this I consciousness, this first degree work. We give the following exercises or developmental drills for the candidate to practice. He will find that a careful and conscientious following of these directions will tend to unfold in him a sufficient degree of the I consciousness to enable him to enter into higher stages of development and power. All that is necessary is for the candidate to feel within himself the dawn of the awakening consciousness or awareness of the real self. The higher stages of the I consciousness come gradually. For once on the path, there is no retrogression or going backward. There may be pauses on the journey, but there's no such thing as actually losing that which is once gained on the path. This I consciousness, even in its highest stages, is but a preliminary step toward what is called illumination, and which signifies the awakening of the initiate to a realization of his actual connection with and in relation to the whole. The full sight of the glory of the I is but a faint, reflected glow of illumination. The candidate, once that he enters fully into the I consciousness, becomes an initiate. And the initiate who enters the dawn of illumination takes his first step upon the road to mastery. The initiation is the awakening of the soul to a knowledge of its real existence. The illumination is the revelation of the real nature of the soul and its relationship with the whole. After the first dawn of the I consciousness has been attained, the candidate is more able to grasp the means of developing the consciousness to a still higher degree, is more able to use the powers latent within him to control his own mental states, to manifest a center of consciousness, an influence that will radiate into the outer world, which is always striving and hunting for such centers around which it may revolve. Man must enter himself before he can hope to exert influences beyond himself. There is no royal road to unfoldment and power. Each step must be taken in turn, and each candidate must take the step himself or herself by his or her effort, but she may and will be aided by the helping hand of the teachers who have traveled the path before her and who know just when that helping hand is needed to lift the candidate over the rough places. We bid the candidate to pay strict attention to the following instruction, as it is all important. Do not slight any part of it, for we are giving you only what is necessary and are stating it as briefly as possible. Pay attention and follow the instruction closely. This lesson must be mastered before you progress. And it must be practiced not only now, but at many stages of the journey until full initiation and illumination is yours. So mark this right here. We're at 34 minutes. And following will be the meditation and a description of this exercise. At the end, I will repeat the affirmations that are given in this exercise. But the goal is from now until the next time I do lesson 2 is to follow this meditation. So this is going to be around 35 minutes and 30 seconds, around there. So just remember that, and I'll try to mark it in the notes. Rules and exercises designed to aid the candidate in his initiation or her initiation. The first instruction along the line of initiation is designed to awaken the mind to a full realization and consciousness of the individuality of the I. The candidate is taught to relax the body and to calm his mind and meditate upon the I until it is presented clearly and sharply before the consciousness. We herewith give directions for producing the desired physical and mental conditions in which meditation and concentration are more readily practiced. This state of meditation will be referred to in subsequent exercises, so the candidate is advised to acquaint himself thoroughly with it. So right now, find a place to meditate. Now, the state of meditation, if possible, retire to a quiet place or room where you do not fear interruption, so that your mind may feel secure and at rest. Of course, the ideal condition cannot always be obtained, in which case you must do your best. The idea is that you should be able to abstract yourself so far as possible from distracting impressions, and you should be alone with yourself, in communion with your real self. It is well to place yourself in an easy chair or on a couch so that you may relax the muscles and free the tension of your nerves. You should be able to let go all over, allowing every muscle to become limp until a feeling of perfect peace and restful calm permeates every particle of your being. Let go. Rest the body. And calm the mind. This condition is best in the earlier stages of the practice, although after the candidate has acquired a degree of mastery, he will be able to obtain the physical relaxation and mental calm whenever and wherever they desire. But they must guard against acquiring a dreamy way of going around, wrapped in meditation when they should be attending to the affairs of life. Remember this. The state of meditation should be entirely under the control of the will and should be entered into only deliberately and at the proper times. The will must be master of this, as well as of every other mental state. The initiates are not daydreamers, but men and women having full control of themselves and their moods. The I consciousness, while developed by meditation and consciousness, soon becomes a fixed item of consciousness and does not have to be produced by meditation. in time of trial, doubt, or trouble. The consciousness may be brightened by an effort of the will. Without going into the state of meditation, the realization of the I. The candidate must first acquaint himself with the reality of the I before they will be able to learn its real nature. This is the first step of this meditation. Let the candidate place him or herself in the state of meditation as described heretofore. Then let them concentrate their entire attention upon their individual self, shutting out all thought of the outside world and other persons. Let them form in their mind the idea of themselves as a real thing, an actual being, an individual entity, a sun around which revolves the world. They must see themselves as the center around which the whole world revolves. So right now, concentrate your entire attention upon your individual self, shutting out all thoughts of the outside world and all other persons. Now form in your mind the idea of yourself as a real thing, an actual being, an individual entity, a sun around which revolves the whole world. You must see yourself as the center around which the whole world revolves. Let not a false modesty or sense of depreciation interfere with this idea, for you are not denying the right of others to also consider themselves centers. You are, in fact, a center of consciousness, made so by the Absolute, and you are awakening to the fact. until the ego recognizes itself as a center of thought and influence and power, it will not be able to manifest these qualities. And in proportion as it recognizes its position as a center, so will it be able to manifest its qualities. It's not necessary that you compare yourself with others or imagine yourself greater or higher than them. In fact, such comparisons are to be regretted and are unworthy of the advanced ego, being a mark and indication of a lack of development rather than the reverse. In this meditation, simply ignore all considerations of the respective qualities of others and endeavor to realize the fact that you are a great center of consciousness, a center of power, a center of influence, a center of thought. And that like the planet circling around the sun, so does your world revolve around you who are its center. It will not be necessary for you to argue out this matter or to convince yourself of its truth by intellectual reasoning. The knowledge does not come in that way. It comes in the shape of a realization of the truth, gradually dawning upon your consciousness through meditation and concentration. Carry this thought of yourself as a center of consciousness, influence, and power with you, for it's an occult truth, and in proportion to that, you are able to realize it. So will be your ability to manifest the qualities named. So for the next several moments, I'm going to leave some time, and I want you to simply focus on that one thought, that you are a center of consciousness, influence of power. You can see planets revolving around you, ideas revolving around you, the universe revolving around you, and that you are at the center of it. You are a center of consciousness, influence, and power. Yourself is a real thing, an actual being, an individual entity, a sun around which revolves the whole world. Imagine yourself in the center of the solar system. You are the sun, and all the planets are revolving around you. No matter how humble may be your position, no matter how hard you may be your lot, no matter how deficient in educational advantages you may be, still you would not change your I with the most fortunate, wisest, and highest man or woman in the world. You may doubt this, but think for a moment and you will see that we are right. When you say that you would like to be this person or that, you really mean that you would like to have their degree of intelligence, power, wealth, position, or whatnot. What you want is something that is theirs, or something akin to it, but you would not for a moment wish to merge your identity with theirs, or to exchange selves. Think of this for a moment. To be the other person, you'd have to let yourself die. And instead of yourself, you would be the other person. The real you would be wiped out of existence, and you would not be you at all, but you would be he. Now I understand I teach in Neville Goddard entering into states, but this is the first step, and that is understanding the true I. If you can grasp this idea, you will see that not for a moment would you be willing for such an exchange. Once you are able to understand your true I, you can start to go into states. Of course, such an exchange is impossible. The I of you cannot be wiped out. It is eternal and will go on and on and on to higher and higher states. It will always be the same I, just as you, although a far different sort of person from your childhood self, still you recognize the same I is there and always has been there. And although you will attain knowledge, experience, power, and wisdom in the coming years, the same I will be there. The I is the divine spark and cannot be extinguished. The majority of people in the present stage of their race development have but a faint conception of the reality of the I. They accept the statement of existence and are conscious of themselves as an eating, sleeping, living creature, something like a higher form of animal. But they have not awakened to an awareness or realization of the I, which must come to all who become real centers of influence and power. Some men, women, have stumbled into this consciousness or a degree of it without understanding the matter. They have felt the truth of it. They have stepped out from the ranks of the commonplace people of the world and have become powers for good or bad. This is unfortunate to some extent, as this awareness, without the knowledge that should accompany it, may bring pain to individuals and others. The candidate must meditate upon the I and recognize it and feel it to be a center. This is his first task. Impress upon your mind the word I. In this sense and understanding, let it sink deep down into your consciousness, so that it will become a part of you. And when you say I, you must accompany the word with a picture of your ego as a center of consciousness and thought and power and influence. See yourself thus, surrounded by your world. Wherever you go, there goes the center of your world. You are the center. And all outside of you revolves around that center. This is the first great lesson on the road to initiation. Learn it. The Yogi masters teach the candidates that their realization of the I, as a center, may be hastened by going into the silence or state of meditation and repeating their first name over slowly, deliberately, and solemnly a number of times. This exercise tends to cause the mind to center upon the I. And many cases of dawning initiation have resulted from this practice. Many original thinkers have stumbled upon this method without having been taught. A noted example of this is Lord Tennyson, who has written that he attained a degree of initiation in this way. He would repeat his own name over and over, and the same meditating upon his identity. And he reports that he would become conscious and aware of his reality and immortality. In short, would recognize himself as a real center of consciousness. So for the next few moments, I'm going to leave silence, and I want you to repeat your name like a mantra over and over again. Repeating your name. Very good. Now understand, as a side note, when he mentions the word ego, he's not talking about ego as we may conceive of it now, which is the mind. We're talking about the personality of your soul, that real ego. So don't get caught up in that word. Just follow these instructions. It's part of the process. There's a wonderful quote here where he says, "We think we've given you the key to the first stage of meditation and concentration. Before passing on, let us quote from one of the old Hindu masters. He says regarding this matter, when the soul sees itself as a center surrounded by its circumference, when the sun knows that it is a sun and is surrounded by its whirling planets, then is it ready for the wisdom and the powers of the masters. The knowledge of the independence of the eye from the body. By the way, I recommend if you check out my meditation, I'm Not the Mind, Not the Body. This will also enhance your understanding of this concept, which is one of the initial first steps of Kriya Yoga. Many of the candidates find themselves prevented from a full realization of the I, even after they have begun to grasp by the confusing of the reality of the I with the sense of the physical body. This is a stumbling block that is easily overcome by meditation and concentration. The independence of the I often becoming manifest to the candidate in a flash upon the proper thought being used as the subject of meditation. The exercise is given as follows. Place yourself in the state of meditation and think of yourself, the real I, which we've done, as being independent of the body, but using the body as a covering and an instrument. Think of the body as you might a suit of clothes. Realize that you are able to leave the body and still be the same I. Picture yourself as doing this and looking down upon your body. So begin by imagining the body and you being independent of the body. That the body is simply just an instrument, a piece of clothes that you have on right now. Dwell upon that thought. Realize that you are able to leave the body and still be the same I. So picture yourself doing this and looking down upon your body. Think of the body as a shell from which you may emerge without affecting your identity. Think of yourself as mastering and controlling the body that you occupy and using it to the best advantage, making it healthy, strong, and vigorous, but still being merely a shell or covering for the real you. Think of the body as composed of atoms and cells, which are constantly changing, but which are held together by the force of your ego, in which you can improve at will. Realize that you are merely inhabiting the body and using it for your convenience, just as you might use a house. In meditating further, ignore the body entirely and place your thought upon the real I that you're beginning to feel to be you. And you will find that your identity, your I, is something entirely apart from the body. You may now say my body with a new meaning. Divorce the idea of your being a physical being and realize that you are above body. Do not let this conception and realization cause you to ignore the body. You must regard the body as the temple of the spirit and care for it and make it a fit habitation for the I, just as you would your house. Do not be frightened if, during this meditation, you happen to experience the sensation of being out of the body for a few moments and of returning to it when you are through with the exercise. The ego is able, in the case of the advanced initiate, of soaring above the confines of the body, but it never severs its connection at such times. It is merely as if one were to look out of the window of a room, seeing what was going on outside, and drawing in his head when he wishes. He or she does not leave the room without, although he may place his head outside in order to observe what is going on in the street. We do not advise the candidate to try to cultivate the sensation, but if it comes naturally during meditation, do not fear. Realize the immortality and invincibility of you, of your I, while the majority accept on faith the belief in the immortality of the soul, yet but few are aware that it may be demonstrated by the soul itself. The Yogi masters teach the candidates this lesson as follows. The candidate places himself in the state of meditation, or at least in a thoughtful frame of mind, and then endeavors to imagine himself as dead. That is, he tries to form a mental conception of himself as dead. This at first thought appears a very easy thing to imagine, but as a matter of fact, it is impossible to do so, for the ego and the I refuses to entertain the proposition and finds it impossible to imagine it. So try it for yourself. Imagine the self as dead. You will find that you may be able to imagine your body as lying still and lifeless, but the same thought finds that in doing so, you are standing and looking at the body. So you see that you are not dead at all, even in imagination, although the body may be. Or if you refuse to disentangle yourself from your body in imagination, you may think of your body as dead, but you who refuse to leave it are still alive and recognize the dead body as a thing apart from your real self. No matter how you may twist it, You cannot imagine yourself as dead. The I insists upon being alive in any of these thoughts, and thus finds that it has within itself the sense and assurance of immortality. In case of sleep or stupor resulting from a blow or from narcotics or anesthetics, the mind is apparently blank, but the I is conscious of a continuity of existence. And so one may imagine himself as being in an unconscious state or asleep quite easily and sees the possibility of such a state. But when it comes to imagining the I as dead, the mind utterly refuses to do the work. The wonderful fact that the soul carries within itself the evidence of its own immortality is a glorious thing. But one must have reached a degree of unfoldment before he's able to grasp its full significance. You, the candidate, is advised to investigate the above statement for yourself by meditation and concentration, for in order that the I may know its true nature and possibilities, it must realize that it cannot be destroyed or killed. It must know that it is before it is able to manifest its nature. So do not leave this part of the teaching until you have mastered it, and it is well occasionally to return to it, in order that you may impress upon your mind the fact of your immortal and eternal nature. The mere glimmering of this conception of truth will give you an increased sense of strength and power. You will find that yourself has expanded and grown, and that you are more aware of a power and center than you have heretofore realized. The following exercises are useful in bringing about a realization of the invincibility of the I, its superiority to the elements. Place yourself in a continued state of meditation as you've been doing, and imagine the I as withdrawn from the body. Now see it passing through the tests of air, fire, and water, unharmed. The body being out of the way, the soul is able to pass through the air at will, float like a bird, to soar, to travel in the ether. It may be seen as able to pass through fire without harm, without sensation. For the elements only affect the physical body and not the real I. Likewise, it may be seen as passing through water without discomfort or danger or hurt. This meditation will give you a sense of superiority and strength, and will show you something of the nature of the real I. It is true that you are confined in the body, and the body may be affected by the elements, but the knowledge that the real I is superior to the body, superior to the elements that affect the body, and cannot be injured any more than it can be killed, is wonderful, and tends to develop the I consciousness within you. For you, the real I are not body. You are spirit. The ego is immortal. The I is immortal and invincible and cannot be killed and harmed. When you enter into this realization, and consciousness will feel an influx of strength and power impossible to describe. Fear will fall from you like a worn-out cloak, and you will feel that you are born again. An understanding of this thought will show you that the things that have been fearing cannot affect the real I, but must rest content with hurting the physical body, and they may be warded off from the physical body by a proper understanding and application of the will. So So do this for a few more moments. Imagine being separate from your body and moving through air, wind, fire, and water. In our next lesson, you will be taught how to separate the I from the mechanism of the mind, how you realize your mastery of the mind, just as you realize your independence of the body. This knowledge must be imparted to you by degrees, and you must place your feet firmly upon one round of the ladder before you take the next step. The watchword of this lesson is I, and the candidate must enter fully into its meaning before you're able to progress. You must realize your real existence, independent of your body. You must see yourself as invincible and impervious to harm, hurt, or death. You must see yourself as a great center of consciousness, a sun around which the world revolves. And then will come to you a new strength. You will feel a calm dignity and power, which will be apparent to those with whom he comes in contact. He will be able to look the world in the face without flinching and without fear, for you will realize the nature and power of the I. You will realize that you are a center of power of influence, and you realize that nothing can harm the I, and no matter how the storms of life may dash upon the personality, the I, the individuality is unharmed. Like a rock that stands steadfast through the storm, so does the I stand through the tempests of the life of personality. And you will know that as you grow in realization, you'll be able to control these storms and bid them still. In words of one of the Yogi masters, the I is eternal. It passes unharmed through fire, the air, the water. Sword and spear cannot kill or wound it. It cannot die. The trials of the physical life are but dreams to it, resting secure in the knowledge of the I. Man may smile at the worst the world has to offer, and raising his hand, he may bid them disappear into the mist from which they emerged. Blessed is he who can say understandingly, I. So, dear candidate, we leave you the first to master the lesson. Be not discouraged of your progress to be slow. Be not cast down if you slip back a step after you gain it. You will gain two at the next step. Success and realization will be yours. Mastery is before. You will attain. You will accomplish. Peace be with you. So now for the next few moments, I'm going to repeat the mantras that are given at the end of this lesson several times. And as you listen to these, you can repeat these mantras as well. You can focus on yourself being the center of consciousness. You can focus on yourself being outside of your body, being safe from fire and water and wind and all of those things. To focus on the lessons that were given in here and these mantras for the next few moments. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal and cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. I I am a center. Around me revolves my world. I am a center of influence and power. I am a center of thought and consciousness. I am independent of the body. I am immortal. And cannot be destroyed. I am invincible and cannot be injured. You remain to be the candidate, and it is your job to find this I. You can go back and repeat these exercises as I've given. You can listen to the lesson given at the beginning of this. This may seem rudimentary, but the unfolding of these lessons is wonderful, and this is a great first step. And we're going to learn from here mental control, our attention and perception. We're going to unfold our consciousness. We're going to discover the mental planes, build our character. This is the ultimate identity shifting treatise that really helps you to understand who you really are. Let me know how much you enjoyed this particular teaching. If you really liked it, I'll work very hard to get the next lesson out very soon. But I promise, have these lessons coming in the future. And join me on these lessons. I will be doing these exercises as well. Please, let me know if you have any questions in the comments. And if we get enough questions in the comments, I may create a separate, possibly Facebook Live event where we can talk about what we're going through when we start these meditational practices. But I want you to unfold right now into an understanding of your power. And this was worked on hundreds of years ago, and these exercises work as a beginning lessons in meditation and on a path of enlightenment and understanding. It's always a real joy and pleasure to share these teachings with you, because I'm learning just as much as I'm teaching. And it really means a lot that you share these with me. And let me know if there's anything else that you want me to explore in regards to this. And keep an eye out. There are 11 more lessons, and they're coming soon. Join my Facebook group at The Reality Revolution, where you can see the most up-to-date posts, and you can ask questions. And we have a whole community of people that want to help answer your questions and help for you to create the reality that you want. For all episodes of The Reality Revolution, please go to therealityrevolution.com. Email me if you have any further questions at media@advancedsuccessinstitute.com. Welcome to The Reality Revolution.